Welcome everybody to our performance and accountability meeting. I don't think we need to do any introductions. Everybody around the room knows who everybody else is. I don't think we've got anything outstanding on the action log. So we'll get straight on to the budget position. Martin and Linda, let's kick off.
Thank you. This is just a short paper with the changes since you approved the budget in January of this year. So 3 changes, 2 of which actually affect the overall level of funding, and 1 is just a presentational issue, but just to update people on. The budget book is now published on the PCC website, and this paper forms part of that overall pack that we have published. So the first one is the council tax receipts. Unfortunately, and this is now the second year this has happened, that the actual amount of council tax receipts has come in less than our estimate, and that is 1.24 million. So for the current year 26-27, we have adjusted for that against the improvement of performance reserve, which is our normal course of action for the current year, and then for 27-28, we have reduced the growth funding line. We had a £2 million sort of general growth funding line in all future years' budgets beyond the next 12 months. That has been reduced, so when we come back round to the next budget process, we will obviously try and identify additional savings, and also just look a bit more to understand why our expectations of council tax were again slightly over optimistic. Given what we know about the building around here, it does seem strange that the actual council tax receipt levels are slightly less.
So this is the council tax base numbers as opposed to under collection in previous years.
The base numbers.
And obviously council confirm their council tax base only in January time, like December, January.
Yeah,
but do we get any estimates in here? So I guess my question is, are these our best guesses based on we've seen some housing growth? What will they be, or are we taking figures from local authorities?
Maybe we should do the former. But this is taking figures from local authorities based on their best guesses and following previous years. We've got the team to be more, more proactive in getting the latest estimates as we go through the process. So that could help for next year, but I guess we're talking what, 1 million out of 200 odd million, so it's about 0.5%. I guess they would say, "Oh, we've done quite a good job here. We're within 0.5%." It's a good challenge though, Matthew.
They may well, but if you're a small billing authority, it depends which authority is the worst. But if you're a small billing authority, the error that you make in your calculations will be negligible in financial terms. You can have a small authority which has got a budget of 50 million. 0.5% in that is not as big a deal to them as it is to us. Do we know, and we don't necessarily have to have the dates now, I appreciate, do we know, I'm assuming this isn't going to be an across the board issue. There'll be some fluctuations everywhere. Do we have, now we've got 2 years of it, do we know that there are local authorities who are particularly bad at forecasting? It seemed unlikely it would be 5% out everywhere.
No, it's only 0.5%.
Sorry, 0.5%. Sorry, yeah. It's unlikely to be 0.5% across the board for every local authority.
Yeah, there are various ups and downs. Of course, the ones that really matter are Oxford, MK, Reading, Slough, the bigger ones matter more. We can kind of.
I'm just real into that. I'm just conscious that where we push local authorities to try and improve their numbers. It wouldn't have made any difference to our decision making around council tax because we have the maximum precept. We could have levied no more to compensate for this. But if we'd have known, we might have been making some different budgetary decisions, balance the books beforehand.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, can we take that as an action then just to dig down into which
we can do that and get some feedback
if there are particular
Thank you.
The second point is the neighbourhood policing officers, which we've obviously had numerous conversations, and we're still working through those numbers. But that change came in after we set the budget. So although we were awarded the extra 5 million for neighbourhood policing numbers, because we lost 3.7 million when they put the back into core grant, the actual net impact was only a 1.5 million increase for TVP, which clearly does not fund 53 additional local policing officers. So for the purpose of the budget book at this moment, what we have done is we've put the extra grants in. We have assumed the full amount will be spent on employees, because there'll be a bit in supplies and services, but for ease at this point in time, until we agree those final numbers, we've put the whole grant onto the employees line, just so we've got the right total amount in there for next year.
Yeah. And we've got some more conversations that we know we need to take place about exactly where those portions go, what other savings we look to make in year and next year to fund that. So just to be clear, I think we're looking at the 22nd of May liaison meeting to bring those numbers back, which we can obviously report at the future meeting, but that will be the point at which we can get to that.
Yeah, I think that can be really useful having that one pager, because we discussed it at our chief officer meeting last week, and we were all slightly different numbers. So I think just getting an absolute one version of the truth, I think would be really useful.
Yeah.
And then the final one doesn't actually change the amount of funding the force gets, but this is the MPCC trying to make sure all forces account for the different grants and funding streams in the same way. So special grants are counted as income and are sort of above the line and actually reduce their net revenue expenditure, whereas core grants are all below the line of council tax and count as that funding to fund the net revenue expenditure. So given that the government has changed some of their funding, so it has moved all up into core funding, we have put those changes through. The MPC finance team have agreed these are the grants which get treated as income and above the line. These are the grants which are treated as funding and go below the line. So all forces should be putting through the same adjustments depending on how they had treated grants before. So although that changes about just under 25 million, the bottom line, the actual amount of money we're getting has not changed. It's purely how we include it. What we are going to have to check up, and we've got our next regional finance meeting, is to make sure that all forces in the South East have done the same, because we do quite a lot of allocations where we use net revenue expenditure. So we need to make sure we are all calculating net revenue expenditure on the same basis, or else those percentage could go slightly out across the 4 or 5 forces.
And this is obviously the point of the MPCC work, but we want to make sure actually all forces are doing it, because our South East allocations are that way, but there's lots of other allocations that will come through that method.
And that was it. Thank you.
The thing I draw attention to, Matthew, on page 10, is where this now leads the reserves. So the I and P reserve, which has previously been able to take the weight of last minute changes like council tax changes and so on, is now down to 600,000 in the medium term, in only 2 years' time, which essentially is nothing. And so our contingency plan now would be the only contingency plan left in terms of reserve is either to not do some of the efficiency improvements, which is kind of perverse and counterproductive, or to use money from the general reserve, which is then where it starts to get risky. We are in, this is a new situation in the next couple of years that we've not been in before, having so little money in that IMP reserve.
And the risk is around unforeseen challenges. Another year of council tax not being what we thought it would be. The IR35 impacts. There's a lot of things that could come down the track to not insignificant sums.
Yeah, especially at the moment.
That are not
potentially inflationary impacts.
An unfunded pay rise in the summer would be know where we can put that.
And we spoke at the end of last week. I don't remember what any numbers aren't necessarily, but just fuel costs for the fleet. Looking at diesel prices.
Yeah.
I mean, if we had to, the other option would be the estates reserve, and actually the amount we're using reserves versus borrowing. And those schemes we're actually pushing ahead with. That's sort of the last resort
yeah.
option that
Well,
we start looking at that.
I mean, the last resort actually, and again, this conversation we had before is actually saying which bits of the estate plan we're just not going to do.
Yeah.
And so actually we just can't afford to do a new custody for Oxfordshire. And we'll just
I
have to
don't
do
think
it.
it's affordable.
So,
All the stuff we want to do, I don't think it's affordable, realistically.
so we are, and actually, if we were to make a significant decision, like to take a major capital project out of the estates programme, that would actually a really quite positive impact, because once you took that borrowing out and released the cash reserves that we're putting into it in capital, we'd certainly be in a relatively comfortable place. But we also wouldn't have a new custody or whatever the project was we cancelled. So conversations for another day. I think it's also worth noting, just so we've got on the record, please, Kirsty, the increasing risk around regional organised crime units and the funding that we've got a meeting later on this week is something that I know that Martin's asked you to get some numbers on. The email that you got from the Home Office on Friday was probably the starkest confirmation of what we sort of thought was the case beforehand, that there will be no funding for 27-28. And obviously that's going to be a national issue as well. So yeah, not for today, but that will, if we don't have some conversations about what we remove from Zeroccu, then we'll again be looking at what we can leave from schools and countries we haven't got. Okay. In which case, let's move on to the non-finance bits. Actually, sorry, just before we do, Linda, have you got anything else we need you for other than the decisions under delegation? Should we do those now? And then
That would be very helpful, thank you.
free you up. So we'll skip on to page 18. No, it's not.
No.
The ones that I've got online, you can't just flick through. So,
Yeah.
have we actually got paper?
On page 18. Yeah.
It went
there's
in
different
slightly
page
late,
numbers.
so if it's, yeah, it was on the meeting, it's in.
That's fine, no problem. I'll look at the one you got on the screen, Kirsty, while I find the actual document.
Yes, apologies, we were a few
no.
days late due to the So this is just the normal report, first 3 months of the year, primarily the contract decisions, which have been through myself and Martin, and the various legal and HR. There's nothing exceptional in there. So it's really, if anyone has any questions.
So just bear with me one moment. It will obviously be nothing when I get there, but I'll at least go down outside. But yeah, that's all fine. Happy to agree those. Thank you very much. Okay, so that's item 8 done. Thank you very much, Linda. You're more than welcome to stay if you would. I won't be
If you
offended.
don't
I won't be offended.
mind.
Thank you. So we are then back to page 11. The key performance indicators. The first one we've got is statutory time limits. Looking at the work to address things, looking at that, who's going to take us through.
Well, I'll take us through these. Shared my, it's not come on. Just bring it on screen when I'm ready. Yeah, ready.
Can you see it as a little box next to where the presenters are, so all the people that have joined?
I can, yeah, I can see that.
So in the top right hand corner, there's a little toggle.
Do the toggle.
That should be.
That's okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, so
You make that bigger, Matty.
yes, it says.
I've got it.
If I take us off the screen, it might make it, yeah.
There you go. Does that help?
Can you close the transcript without it moving it? There we go.
Okay, so that's it. Okay. Three areas of focus today. First, looking at investigations exceeding time limits. So you can see here that year to date, we've had 8.3% uptick in the number of cases exceeding prosecution time limits. That's where a case has gone beyond our prosecution time limits. We've closed that with code 17. That's a real increase of 56 cases. You can see that the uptick has fluctuated kind of quarter by quarter, month by month. That's fairly typical given where our cases close and that the volumes in this space are fairly low when you account for that against our full crime investigation profile. This is something we track consistently through Force Performance Group. There's a focus on it in our Justice Gateway as well. And we've now built, we had already built mechanisms in this so that each officer is cited on their cases that have STL. That's available in Tempo and is a consistent topic of conversation within health checks and performance meetings. The new benefit that we're hoping to bring to this is an automated reminder kind of setup for officers, so that this will be run by an RPA process, and officers will get automated email reminders at certain points within their investigation. So that only went live in February. So we are hoping that that will see real benefit for officers, but we need a bit of time to see how that beds in. The other element that's planned for this year is a focused service improvement review on case files and the process of case file building for officers, which will hopefully get under the skin of some of the barriers that we have around our STLs. And then the other element that we have focused on in this year with the service improvement review into forensics is getting better sight of those cases that have STLs into our forensics department. What we're finding is it was very difficult for our forensics team to understand which cases they were receiving that had an STL, which didn't. And obviously that has a significant impact on making sure they're better cited. So we put in processes that we've got better sight of those in forensics, and we're going to then bring that profile through and track that where forensics is an issue in our STL deadlines.
So do you have, I presume I haven't got it on this slide here, but two questions about the data. One would be the total number of offences that will be subject to a statutory time limit. So 56 cases, it's an 8.3% increase. As a percentage, that's quite a large increase.
Yep.
And you've got 728 cases. If that's 728 cases out of 7,000, that's quite a high proportion. If it's 728 out of 70,000, then very different. So I'm just, one is the scale of the problem. And I guess the second, and you touched on it there, do we know the causes of it? Clearly, workflow officers not getting to it is one of them. The reminders may address that, but you've also touched on forensics. So within the data, are you able to see what proportion fail to make them because they're waiting for something to be examined?
Yeah, so we've got a good sense of the profile around thieves within there through a number of different routes. First of all, forensics is one of those elements, which is why we did that work in the service improvement review to try and make sight of those far easier for our forensic teams. Officers keeping on top of their caseload is another big one, which is why we put in place that element of rolling kind of repeated reminders, because it's not, and it hadn't been before we put Tempo in place, very evident for an officer in niche which of their cases on their docket had an STL which didn't. It just doesn't gear very well for that in niche. So that's why we put that in place. The other elements around it, there are some cases that will always be a code 17 regardless, because of when they were reported and when we have an opportunity to investigate them, they will be a code 17 whatever we did. So what we've done in Tempo and other profiles is we've split those kind of profiles, be able to kind of draw those out. I've not brought those numbers today, but I can kind of give you that profile outside of the meeting about which fall into each of those categories. So there are a good comprehension of some of our issues. Some of the other issues around case file building and confidence to build case files, those elements, that's what we want to try and get under the skin of with our service improvement reviews this year. The Justice Gateway have a good handle on some of those things, but we want to get a bit under the skin of it, and crucially want to try and drive that out in a meaningful way to different areas that might have a bigger issue than others. So yes, I think for a large part we do understand a fair amount of the themes. We want to do a bit more work to try and really hammer that home for us. Just to give you a sense, this is not a profile of all of our closed jobs, but this is our open jobs with the statutory time limit. At the minute, we got approximately 5,000 currently open investigations. That doesn't account for all of your investigations that will be closed this year, so that would be a far higher number. But again, I can get that from the profile.
Okay, yeah, that'd be helpful just to understand.
I mean, my observation might be every single one of these is a failure. So on one level, and it is complicated. I've talked to CPS about this. Sometimes it's CPS, we are struggling with the caseload, or they're struggling with the caseload, and they get results to us literally the day before, and we can't find the person, we can't charge them. There's something I know we're working really closely with the CPS on this as a joint priority. It was going in the right direction last year. We did make improvements, didn't we?
We made improvements last year.
So it's annoying that we seem to have taken a step back here. But I do think the officer workload is an issue, even though we've been able to drive down officer workload overall. Of course, these cases are the ones that are the lowest risk. That makes sense. They're the lowest. They'll be like a common assault rather than ABH or a GBH. So you can, on one of you understand the officers focusing on those more.
And this is the sort of thing that you get a juxtaposition of importance versus urgency.
Exactly.
These are urgent, but they're not necessarily as important.
That's exactly right. Yeah. But look, that's an excuse. I mean, we shouldn't be missing these if we've got structures in place and good supervision at a local level.
Yeah. Okay, so this is monitored as part of the performance pack anyway.
Yeah.
I think if you can supply some other data so we understand what the proportion of the overall is, because I think that'd be quite helpful to understand the scale of it. And then if you've got some level of breakdown of the causality, if you like, that'd be, I think the forensics is a really good example where you've identified that there's a bit of a process in there to try and address it, but again, to understanding what portion of the overall will be benefited by that. And then you've got the new robotics coming into place to provide new reminders.
Yeah, so that's already in place, but it only went live on the 3rd of February. So we're going to give that some time just to understand. And that's why we're going to track this through to next year. It's in the strategic plan for next year as well. So we've been tracking that through.
Yeah, so again, I think that this is probably one then there's no point coming back to it in 6 months or so again, unless it's an issue. But if we come back to it again, so this time next year, Pam, I think that'd be a sensible time to see if those changes are bedded in. Okay. Good stuff, thank you. Closure notices and closure orders.
Yes, so the screen rolls down. Is that roll down for everyone? Yes. So this is a big one of our powers that we use in the ASB space. And the first thing to say here is that our recording in our system is not clean, say the least. So in a perfect world, what you would see is a single record for a closure notice, which happens first, and then a separate record for a closure order, which is where you go to the magistrate and ask for that to be granted. What we're seeing very frequently, and you can see this because we've got far fewer closure notices than closure orders, which is not the right way around necessarily, is that officers are recording both of those in one record. So where you are seeing far more closure orders, what's happening there is the officer is recording the closure notice and the closure order all in the same record. That's something that John Batty, the Community Policing Command, is aware of, and he's working with the operational effectiveness units to kind of bring something that's better for officers. Some of it is reinforcing to officers that they ought to be doing it separately. I think bigger benefit there will come with a streamlined way of recording for them, that it doesn't make inherent sense necessarily if you know you're going to the order stage to not record it in the same place. So I understand that practice and we want to make that clean for officers. That's why John is talking to the operational effectiveness unit rather than just reaffirming to officers do both. If we don't have to get asked them to do both, it sort of makes sense. So that works with John. In terms of the profile of our use, the vast majority of those are in residential properties, and the vast majority of those for drugs misuse. Some around exploitation, some cuckooing, but it really tends to fall in the drug space. And that's it, I think, in the profile that we've got.
Okay, thank you. I mean, yeah, I agree. The data is pretty important. But I think what it also suggests, which fits with my understanding, and this is why, as you know, and Jason, we talked about it, the legislation changes that I've been trying to get through, which I've only got so far on. I think there is a problem because the 24-hour extendable to 48 is frankly doesn't do a lot. So if you're an officer dealing with something, the notice is just a means to an end to get an order. Whereas if you had a 7-day period where you could put a notice in place, that in and of itself would be something quite powerful. One, I think it would make it easier to do and gives you more time to do the paperwork and get to the magistrates. But actually being able to impose 7 days, certainly around a commercial property rather than some of the residential ones, is a greater power in itself. It was actually 24 hours, I would imagine, from what you said about the recording. I'm an officer, I'm applying for an order. I have to make a notice first in order to get to that stage, but it's just a bureaucratic process. I'll go and stick it on the door in order to get me into the court, rather than thinking of the notice as a power in itself. And that creates a greater level of a greater threshold in some ways to be able to put that in place.
So I don't have kind of personal experience with this, but that's where the data and that manner of recording leads me. I think that's exactly what's happening here, is that officers are making that call to go for an order right at the first instance when they understand what's going on in front of them. And the notice is that kind of barrier.
I'm really interested in the fact that there were only 3 closure order occurrences for business, and I wonder if we could have that dug into a bit more, Matthew, because certainly from your experience out with the community, I think, the fact that you're lobbying for the increase to 7 days would suggest to me that there's a larger demand than is showing in the figures.
Yeah, I mean, this is the area that Paul in our office is working with Christian on to come up with a wider strategy about how we deal with some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not data you will have. Anecdotally, and I can say no more than that, I would say I've come across forces being more proactive using closure orders around commercial premises. Now, it might be they perceive that the problems they've got around those commercial premises are greater than the ones we have in Thames Valley.
It shouldn't matter that should it?
No. So that's my perception at least. If you think of a force the size of Thames Valley, so I've only done 3 closure orders on businesses in 12 months.
Yeah, that's
either the power is completely useless and they're not worth using, which doesn't feel like anybody's telling me that's the case, or we're just missing a trick. And I think it's the latter.
It'd be interesting to understand if we can get any intelligence from the frontline guys. No holds barred. Is it just too complicated? Are there issues?
Yeah.
What is it that's creating that?
When I speak to neighbourhood officers, they find the process to get a closure order very bureaucratic.
Yes.
The time it takes, the amount of evidence that you need. That being the case, certainly with many I spoke to recently, almost celebration when they get one. It's quite hard. Obviously, it's one of the things. The more you do, the easier it gets. Like anything.
And my point about the thing I'm banging on about at the moment about the length of time. If you're only doing it for 24 hours and the notice is a means to an end of getting an order, then it's very bureaucratic. You would obviously want, in an ideal world, to get 100% success rate in court anyway.
Yeah.
But actually, if you've got the power to do 7 days, and that will disrupt that business, you might take a chance that I'm only 70% confident I'll get this when I get to court. And I sort of don't mind too much if I lose a few because I've had that impact in the first instance. Okay, so we've got a separate piece of work with Paul and Christian to look at the wider strategy around this, which eventually will come back to liaison.
But I just wonder, I'll brief Paul on the need to be alert to the number of business closure orders, but Rachel may well want to pick up that action, Rachel, to just explore that in a bit more detail.
Yeah, happy to take that.
Thank you.
So just on that front, Rachel, the person who goes on that will be John Batty, so you can get to his front line and kind of feeling on that because you won't get it from the data.
No.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
And it's John you're working with to look at the process about recording because
John's leading the process around recording with the Operation Effects Unit, which is headed up by Superintendent Mark.
Thanks, Matthew.
Good stuff, thank you. And then we're on to hotspot policing.
Yes. So a very positive picture here. So the expectation from the Home Office when this was first set up was that we hit 15,300 hours of valid patrols over the course of the year. As at the end of this year, we achieved 20,972 hours of valid patrols, obviously significantly outstripping that expectation. We've broken that down into our individual LCUs, to make sure that they were all keeping track with that expectation, and every LCU exceeded the target that was set for the number of hours patrolling. This is an area that obviously the government are no longer funding, although the expectation still remains that we use this actively. So we're going to be tracking that continually into next year. It'll be interesting to see where that expectation sits and what we look at in terms of how much time we put into these patrolling activities, especially given the very stringent targets around attendance for grade 1 that government is pointing forces to as well. So there's a balance here to be struck, but I think a very positive, proactive performance, particularly in that space this year.
So, did you go on?
I just wonder what work is being done, and I know I've raised this with Dennis as well in the Trust and Confidence Board last week. It'd be really interesting to understand what hotspot activity is being done in areas where trust and confidence is lower and there's a match with maybe higher crime, or what intelligence gathering is being done with this data versus the trust and confidence data to amalgamate all of that as an operational tactic to deploy.
So, well, I think there are two elements there. One is the trust and confidence information feeding back into that, one is crime information feeding back into that.
Mm-hmm.
So the evidence base from hotspot patrolling, and this is the national evidence base, is that it does not reduce crime in hotspots. That's a well-founded kind of evidence base. That's not to say that there's no benefit in doing this work, and the Home Office is taking forces down that route. And it's definitely not to say that we've not seen benefit in TVP for that.
Might increase trust and confidence.
Exactly. So the driving down of crime, I would say, based on the national body of evidence that we've got, that's based on far more hours than this, because we've got a national data profile, is that we shouldn't necessarily expect crime to reduce in these hotspot areas, but it might. On the trust and confidence, I think that's where we need to have better granular information around our trust and confidence down to a geographic location, and that's where you need body of information coming back from your public.
So over a period of time, we'll be able to do that and build it up.
Exactly that. That is absolutely a possibility.
Brilliant.
But I think that with the scale of trust and confidence information we've currently got back from the survey, it's probably not possible at this point. If we get to the point where we've got a volume of that we can pinpoint to geographic locations, we can absolutely kind of plot one against the other and see what that's doing. Yeah.
Lovely, thank you.
And accepting what you might expect from in terms of the impact on crime, because I think there's different evidence about different crime types about what it would do in terms of crime reduction.
Yeah.
Is there, I know we haven't got it today, but is there data around looking at where those hotspot locations are? Because we've got the hotspot geographies that are identified, but then you've also got the ability now to just monitor the number of hours that they put up patrolling, which may not be specifically in a hotspot.
Yeah.
But these are also hotspot patrols.
Yeah.
So are you able to overlay that with the data and say, well, this was the crime rate in this location last year, we've done X number of patrols, and this is the crime rate this year?
Yes, that is possible. The other thing that we've done specifically with our hotspot patrolling is that what we found, it was driven by serious violence initially in terms of where those hotspots would be. That it became very evident that the volume that we were dealing with there wasn't sufficient to give enough time in the hotspot patrol areas for all of our officers, especially when you break it down by LCU. There are some LCUs that you would have a body of patrols that was sufficient, others you just didn't have it based on just that crime profile. So that's when we added in the ASB to it. So those hotspots themselves are driven by the crime profile. So you can see that profile. Yeah.
Okay. Outside of the meeting, rather than bringing it back here in the future, it'd be useful to look at the before and after data around crime levels, if you can provide some of that. It doesn't need to be broken down to every local area. Fascinating as it would be, but if we can say, well, for our designated hotspots, before and after crime levels, given the amount of patrolling, would be really helpful. Yeah, for sure.
And we were brought back to the government of the summer period that we'd made 1,300 arrests in our hotspots. which you'll see that the hotspots are a good, the right areas.
Well, and it's an interesting thing saying hotspot policing doesn't impact on crime, because one could argue then, close your ears, Matthew, that neighbourhood policing won't impact either. And yeah, that's a hell of a jump to make, but you run the risk of people sort of saying that.
So I think it's important to just frame what that evidence base delivered, which is not that it didn't have an impact on crime. It did not drive crime levels down. I think those are two very different things. So Jason's point around arrests being made is a positive impact on crime.
Mhm.
Doesn't necessarily mean that your crime rate in those areas will go down inherently.
But the crime solve rate,
But the crime solve rate.
if the crime solve rate goes up, that's a positive impact.
It's exactly that. So, and it all sort of depends on what you are articulating as a positive impact that your neighbourhood teams provide.
Yeah.
That's never been something that's particularly easy to define or identify. I think we're way closer to that now, certainly TUP and other areas, picking what we've done to try and monitor our neighbourhood work from that. So yes, I think I see the true line, Gillian, but I think that it's the crime volumes that don't necessarily show causational reductions, not necessarily positive impact on crime. That is probably a more nuanced and tricky thing to monitor.
Looking at the graph, and obviously Oxfordshire seems to be an outlier around October of last year. Yeah, quite what happens in Oxfordshire in October. I mean, there are, if you iron that bit out, there are some seasonal trends which sort of make some sense around the summer activity, etc. And broadly speaking, a good trend with increases in recent months. I'm less concerned about disparity, because I guess what we don't capture here is the difference in size of LCUs. If we're talking about absolute number of hours, Buckinghamshire, Milton Keynes and Oxfordshire are just, Milton Keynes is smaller geographically but has a higher population and more officers, so you're going to get a higher number of patrols than you are in West Berkshire, for example. But we're seeing an increase in the 26th to February to March 2026. That trajectory sort of looks broadly positive overall. As in, if I drew a trend line, it would probably be heading up.
Yeah.
Would we expect it to continue to rise, or?
So I think that John Batty will probably give you a far more nuanced answer than I would, because he understands that profile better. I think with the Home Office removing funding for this, I think we've got to expect that might plateau at least, because a healthy amount of this has been done with a mixture of kind of business as usual hours, but also overtime hours. And that funding for overtime is going to not be there from an external point of view, given the funding position of the force. That's a difficult choice we'll have to make. So it's one that we're going to keep monitoring again into next year. But would I expect that to continue exponentially upwards? Probably not. That would be my feeling.
Okay.
Sorry to bring the neighbourhood policing back into it again. Daft question, probably. But would your neighbourhood patrols potentially be put into hotspots? Does that make sense? Am I making sense in the question that I'm asking?
Well, they are. I mean,
So you might not necessarily see that plateau if you've had an increase in officers and.
If it's a real increase, I mean, you're in an ideal world.
You wouldn't.
If we had all the resources we wanted, you wouldn't be doing this stuff through overtime funding.
Yeah.
You would have more officers there,
Yes.
which would increase your overall capacity. And in the short term, that's actually more expensive because you've got to recruit more people and get them in. In the long term, it works out cheaper because you're getting more for them. So that's where we should get to. But of course, we know there are lots of other pressures on actually recruiting those additional neighbourhood officers, whether they are actually neighbours, what else they do, and some of the overall funding challenges. But I mean, you're right. As you grow neighbourhood, you should be able to do this more cheaply.
As business as usual.
Yes, in theory, as long as you have that growth and that real growth, they'll be able to know the funding. There's challenges inherent within that. The other thing that affects this, and talking a little bit about the peaks and troughs of activity here, is one proactive activity on each LCU. They will run operations related to specific issues in their areas that might increase their hotspot patrolling at certain times of the year. So that will be inherent in the chart. But also our operational activity outside of hotspot patrolling will also have an impact. So you will see some depressions in our hotspot activity when you have large scale operations. Those sorts of elements will always impact. So that will kind of impact as you move through a year.
Understandable.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Anything else on that for you, Jason?
I suppose one of the challenges is about neighbourhood abstractions, about how what officers find is when they're not being deployed to instance, they're progressing investigations. It's just more than inspectors speak to you about. A lot of our officers and neighbourhoods have got a high caseload themselves. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because a great way to solve the problem is to just call offenders committing crime in like ASB locations. The rest of things are really, really good thing. But potentially, I think it's the workload resource issue. We haven't got enough resources to do everything we have. I think the advantage of having overtime available, that means it always happens. So I think in reality you will have a dip, I think, in your patrols of reality.
Okay.
We've got the large performance pack attached to the meeting as always. That's at the end of February. I'm conscious where we are in the year. We have now closed the financial, or the strategic year rather, and we've got PG coming up next week to kind of wrap that up. But I'm happy to give a kind of brief summary of where we landed with some of the highlights if you want, but if you're not,
We'll come on to that in a minute.
Yeah, I think we've got a couple of items for Jason. So police force fit for the future, which is sort of whatever you might want to showcase in terms of some of the back office stuff and then the operational highlights. Yeah, feel free to chuck those in there if you wish. But I haven't got any specific questions, I guess, from the data.
Yeah, so a few highlights from me, Matthew. Firstly, we recently had our HMIC peel inspection. I just feel like we're inspected all the time. More than ever before, about our biannual kind of a large inspection. Ali led that. We had the hot debrief about 3 weeks ago. Lots of positives there overall in comparison to last time we were inspected. Now, I might go through some of the operational highlights. But one of the things I was really pleased about in the hot debrief, we'll wait to see what happens in the final report and grading, is the investment in people we've had that were kind of screamed out as to do some really, really good work here. So our recruitment's in a very good place, and the inspectors found real improvements in attracting and retaining staff. They were very complimentary about our force website, with showcasing staff who are passionate about their role, but the gritty reality of what it means to be a police officer. They were supportive of our how effective we've been in recruiting detectives. It's a national crisis. We have no crisis in TVP. We have more detectives. In fact, we have to turn off our detective pipeline because of the interest we have in innovative work we do in the military to get people with firearms experience to join us. A lot of work, positive cultural work, particularly around police staff and how we use police staff through our police staff talent mobility program. All the wellbeing work that we're doing, and feedback from staff is it is making a difference and staff feel valued. So overall, I could go on. We're effective at supporting staff who are assaulters. We've improved the quality of our psychological screening, and as a result, as you know, with our recruitment and retention figures, recruitment is in a good place. We have no police officer vacancies other than normal turnover, no detective vacancies, no vacancies in our control room. So it feels like we're, as an organisation, we're stable, if you like, and people are staying longer than they had. The retention is really, really good. So really pleased about that. Moving on, so we'll see the report will be published in July. Ali warned it, so we'll see what happens there. But we're expecting a good report overall. It's very hard to get good. Not many, if any, forces get a good, a completely good inspection or areas. We think overall it'll be a very positive. And as you're aware, in the EU tiering system of forces, 1 to 4, tier 1 being good and improving, and the 3 below that being work to be done. We've been putting tier 1, haven't we? So it's a good force that continues to improve, which is good. In addition, we've done a lot of work around tasking and resourcing following the force restructure, moving our resources where they need. We've created additional sergeants in specialist teams. We've got more supervision, particularly as we know we have a slight dip this year, but levels of officers who have less than 5 years service. We're currently only about 36%. Back in 2015, it was 14%. So we doubled the number of young and inexperienced officers. We put more sergeants in place to look after them. We've gone live with a neighbourhood dashboard so we can monitor abstractions from neighbourhood staff, and that's received very good feedback from the Home Office, being able to monitor the actual contributions made by neighbourhood officers. We've introduced, as you're aware, our Bobby, our AI chatbot, with a new additional digital channel to support contact from the public. We've been very happy to bring some detailed update on this at some point. But at this time, Bobby's resolving 76% of all calls without the need of human intervention, which is a staggering figure in terms of, and really good feedback on those using it. It's not a normal chatbot where when you try to contact a bank, they just can't answer your question. You keep going back. You're in this loop, aren't you? And very often these private companies don't allow you to speak to a human. At any point, you've got to be human. But 76% of the time, it can resolve.
I'm glad you said, and it's getting positive feedback from the users, because that was going to be my question. Was it's great that it's resolving 76, but is it resolving it to the satisfaction of the person that's phoned in?
Yes, we have that. We have that data in the same way.
Brilliant.
So and obviously many of the forces are looking at what we're doing and looking to expand that. Of course, then it takes away your call demand, and as you know, the contact handling, calling informants, which Matty will cover, I'm sure, is great. It was 7.5 minutes to answer 101. It's now about a minute, which is
Very impossible.
I think I promised you we'd be below 3. I never thought we'd get
the promise never delivered.
Yeah, always best way, Matthew.
Yeah.
But investment in technology is we haven't got any more people, we haven't got any more money, but investment in technology in key areas is the way forward for us to be more efficient.
And that's one of the things I still bang on about a lot. And I think actually the fact that the call time is so good, it will be easy to lose sight of that now, because I get very few complaints.
I do too.
You get a few legacy things of people who think it will take a long time. I get very few complaints, and it's easy to forget the level of complaints that we've both got 2 or 3 years ago.
Look at the abandonment rate.
Yeah.
It was about 35% of people ringing in 101, which was, we get sick waiting would leave.
Yeah.
Now it's about 8%.
Yeah.
And that's after messaging. So it might be they leave because
They've actually followed the message.
which is go online to report whatever it is. But we've got data of those who put the phone down and then contact us again. So I have no idea how you did that data, Matty, but it's really good. So you can see which ones are really, is there any risk in there?
Yeah.
So we're in a good place around that. I think finally is the work we've done on Project Cornerstone that concluded last week. So this is work we did in effect designed to give a shot in the arm around reducing bureaucracy across the workforce. And it's gone down really well. So the chair of the Police Federation said it completely exceeded her expectations, and officers do complain, and staff, particularly officers, complain about the time they spend behind a desk filling in forms. So that has led to 644 submissions across the force. Generally, I visited nearly every ICR team in the force, didn't really give a personal update. That has led to 2.3 million minutes being saved, like 19 police officers. And it's been so successful. We are continuing on for another 3 months looking at custody and criminal justice, because we've designed to everything from when a call comes in to you arrive at custody, and a third of those submissions are about custody and criminal justice. In effect, a lot of really, really simple stuff, which is just when there's forms we have to fill in, reducing the number of boxes, which sounds stupid or awful, just completely changing how the system looks so officers can get information off the system much clearer. Everything about a good example would be we've got rid of logbooks from the car. So officers it probably takes a minute a day, but rather than, we've got telematics, so we know exactly where you have to swipe to dial in. So there's lots of little things, and a lot more to do as well. We paused and we're trialing, and there's risk around this, but pausing crime recording or stalking harassment for 72 hours before we recorded the crime. So we've chosen HMIC. It's technically outside the guide. So the reason why we're doing that is the vast amount of crime we over record is stalking harassment. And the reason why is I'm a stalking victim, and then the person gives me, come harassing me again. At the moment of control, that's another crime that's recorded rather than added to the single occurrence. So it's a crime recording feature, if you like. And we're spending far too much time cancelling crimes that were never crimes in the first place, which adds no value to them.
So the approach on that would be you've got your stalking victim, and that's not to say, and I think is what you're saying, but just for the record, you're not saying, well, that's very interesting, thank you for reporting that. We won't do anything about it for 3 days. What we're saying is, great, that's it. That might be grade 1, it might need an urgent attendance, it might be grade 2, grade 3, but what that will carry on. The recording will just be paused, and then
so when the officer goes there, he or she is deployed, can make an assessment whether this is a new crime or it's a
Continuation.
I think that's as an example. If this is successful, I think it will might look at doing with the crime types because cancelling a crime doesn't add any value to the public. And the work we've done, Mike, isn't it fair to say we are vastly over recording crime because you'd rather be over recording than under recording, and the amount of time bureaucracy takes officers to cancel in the first place.
There's 2 really important points that you're spot on, Matthew. It doesn't stop activity, it just delays the application of the crime classification on that record. So the CMP record still exists, the incident record still exists, it goes into niche, it can be progressed, but we don't tick that box. The reason for that, I think, is really important, comes back down to Jason's point at the end there. And I think the crime cancellation process is really important for 2 reasons. First off, the time it takes officers to do. So that will save time for officers not to have to go through that bureaucratic process. But equally, because it's taking so much time now, it's far easier for officers to record that crime as something different and just to close that crime down than it might be for them to actually go through that cancellation process. That causes a problem with application of codes on crimes that were never crimes in the first place, and that becomes very, very important when you
look assault rate that's worse because
it's exactly that.
Just firing it other ways.
And that becomes much more pertinent because of the change to the Home Office and HMRC's direction of travel with how you record outcome rate. Because now that's not set against your volume of crime, it's just set against the number of outcomes you apply. If you're applying outcomes when you should actually be cancelling that crime, what you're doing is inflating the non-positive outcome profile, and you are reducing the number of non-crimes that should be over here. So that will have a double impact on your outcome rate in a positive way if we get that right.
I think there's a real theme here in terms of a slightly different example, Matthew, but I think relevant in that when I was out on night shift at Milton Keynes, they were showing me how there was a particular person suffering from harassment from her son, but her name was recorded in about 20 different ways on the system. And it's a similar sort of thing around the amount of time it takes the officer to put it right, rather than making sure. So there's a bit of a theme, I think, in terms of that data recording that could create efficiencies across the board.
Yeah, so crime data accuracy is a defined aim within our street plan this year for the first time ever. We've always addressed crime data accuracy issues, but we've addressed that thematically through certain areas, and we've got those out where we are dealing with crime profiles in, rural crime, for example. We would then try and address some of the data issues within rural crime as standalone. We've got crime data accuracy as a defined problem in and of itself to try and tackle. The over-recording, he was talking around this one of that. The issue that you point out there, Gillian, around duplicate nominals, not having a single golden nominal, that's being worked on by Jason Saxon's team in our Joint Information Management.
Brilliant.
What they've started with is a list of 150 highest demand volume individuals, and they are looking through each of those individuals to clean their records and to make sure that we don't have that example that you've got multiple different kind of layers of a single individual. We're going to take that learning out into the wider kind of nominal profile.
When you say nominal, could that be a victim or an offender?
Yep.
So just for the language online.
Yes, sorry. The first list that they're starting with is offender focused, that first 150, and then that can be applied to victims as well. The same.
Okay. Brilliant. Thank
So
you.
effectively, what we're trying to do is take the bureaucracy that's getting in the way of officers effectively doing their job, what they want to do, and trying to get away from tasks that actually don't benefit public, and focus on what do the public want our people to spend their time doing. Now, there's always recording, reporting, which we have to do for good reason, good bureaucracy, for example. Like for risk, assess risk as a good example. But it's had a really positive effect. I mean, the challenge we've got the chief ops team now is how do we prevent in the future not having to have a project cornerstone for a 3-month short.
You don't create stuff.
Exactly. So there's a new process through governance and service improvement about when you create a new thing, go through governance, test what the implication, record that before you make that decision, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
To really understand the unintended consequences, particularly time on supervisors actually.
Right. Of those 600 plus that you had in, sort of suggestions to Cornerstone, do they sit with your team in terms of?
Not with mine. So,
what I'm interested in, I mean, that sounds really, really positive and really good. What I'm interested in is those ones that perhaps someone make a perfect good suggestion, and the analysis is, well, that would be great, but we can't do that because that's the Home Office.
Yeah.
Or that's HMIC.
Yeah.
And those are the ones we don't have control over. So you can't change the form because you've got to fill that form in. Of those, there will still be some good bureaucracy. There must be something good that comes out of the Home Office at some point. But then there's also going to be some bad bureaucracy there. That I'm quite interested in that bit of where can I be leaning in to the Home Office and with colleagues and through the MPCC as well to be saying, okay, well we've done this stuff in force to improve the actual way that someone records it, but there might be some of those things we say, well, we should just stop doing it.
Yeah.
And that form that used to be a paper form, you've now created a fancy way of automating it. Lovely. Should we just not do it at all? And at the moment, you can't do that because it's a Home Office requirement. We've talked so many times about the use of force.
Yeah.
Great example of use of force is we've put it on Toronto now, so it's electronic, and we've reduced the boxes by, I don't know what it is, I can't remember. So we've made it quicker to fill in, but whether we need to record that data in the first place is good.
So an action after this would be really good for whoever does hold that data is can either we'll just take the long list of 600 things and we'll go through from our end to try and understand what bits are, or if there are themes that have already been identified by the force that are, yes, that sounds great, but they're outside of TPP's control, so we'll just put them on that long list.
Preferably the latter
And you as
option.
well, indeed. Because Rachel's starting to sweat.
Yes, Rachel, I'm sticking up for you here.
So yes, but having that would be really useful. Whoever owns the
I
data.
agree. And particularly with HMIC Chief Inspector changing and a new one coming in, it's a damn good opportunity to try and deal with the bureaucracy.
Yeah, we've shared our findings with the Home Office Police Efficiency Programme. We're really interested as well, so we've shared that with them. And we're giving we're FMF this year, the presentation. We've got inspectors road shows going at the moment. We're covering Cornerstone. We give you a 15-minute update, either at a later meeting or something to give you.
That'd be great.
Highlighted, that'd be interesting.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Are there things in those Cornerstone, ideas that are likely to come into the Efficiency and Innovation Fund, do you think?
that was actually a conversation, I think, in last CCMT, wasn't it? That there may well be things that we haven't been able to achieve in the Cornerstone timeframe that we want to try and move forward with. That I think that they're looking at a list within that.
I just think that's another arena in which you might be interested in leaning in.
So on the back of that, one thing that's come out from Cornerstone is lots of these tweaking that automate. So if we had a bigger robotic process automation team, we could do more. Still backlog. The team do great work. So whether we could invest more money in them in order to free out more savings.
Yeah, agreed. Good. Okay. Anything on operational highlights? And we don't need to go through the full pack, but stuff that you want to pull out.
Yeah, so I can just run through the quick list. So as Jason said, really good work on our retention and our pipeline. So we've seen a 7% reduction in officer resignations this year, which is a real positive. We've met our neighbourhood growth target, which and that's been tracked consistently. Our victim satisfaction still remains really excellent, very strong and stable for us. And some of that is driven by our excellent call handling. And Jason's already mentioned it. We've outstripped what we thought we would get to this year quite significantly, which is great. Our attendance this year, I think it's worth just reflecting on a significant challenge for us. We've really gotten our understanding and our profile around our attendance data in a brilliant space. And now that we have these very stringent targets nationally on this front. It's very clear from my discussion with other forces that we are in a far better situation than a lot of other forces in terms of our ability to comprehend what we do, and also our ability to understand that we are giving service to the public where we are saying that we are. For the last 5 months of the year, we hit both our grade 1 and grade 2 targets for this year, which is really positive. Knife crime is down by 10% this year. Rural crime is down by 34%. We've recorded over 400 more charges, 500 more out of courts. Within our profile, shoplifting outcomes have gone up by over 600. So there are lots of real positives from the year. There are also things that we need to continue focusing on and drive into next year. And really that kind of hits at that core element of our service. It's getting to jobs quickly, focusing on victim experience, and making sure that we are getting the best outcomes for victims. So that message is really clear. I think, we talk about it all the time. Jason, Ben, our chief officer team talks about it. I was in the contact management and local policing board earlier where Christian was giving that message very clearly. So I'm really hoping with that consistency and through line from our plan and the achievements we've been able to make this year, we're in a good spot to keep driving that.
So overall, I think we're trying to strip things back to the basics that matter most to the public. So we pick the phone up quicker, we attend incidents quicker, we making more arrests, we're solving more crime, and we're keeping victims updated. So all those 5 things have improved the last year and continue to improve year by year, which is really positive.
Yeah, as the head of service improvement, I'm never satisfied. But our performance trajectory is positive in almost every single area. Now, that doesn't mean that we're hitting exactly where I want us to hit, and that we've got lots of work to do, and that's why we've got the strategic plan for this year and setting there, challenging, stretching. But we are not in a position where I'm hitting the end of the year and thinking, blimey, we've got a long way to turn the ship. We're actually, I feel far more positive than that, which is really great. Yeah.
Good, well done. I think you're right, very good work over the year. You're right, absolutely right, Jason, to focus on getting the basics right. That's the stuff that matters to people ultimately. Okay, thank you. Here's everything we've got on the operational highlights. Ali, we're over to you for inspections. Kept you waiting again, but not as long as we do sometimes.
No, that's okay. Just gonna make it bigger, Mario. Oh, we've done it. Thank you. So the first slide is our the joint audit actions, and then the second slide is our HMIC recommendations and AFIs. Yes, we've had our peel inspection, so we've now pushing forward with a concerted effort focusing on our overdue actions, in particular on the audits. What I've recognised is actually there's a couple on here that are showing as overdue, but we've had assurance at our DCC Risk Improvement and Learning meeting that they are actually supposed to be closed. So I know that there's a bit of admin that we need to do to improve. So the environmental one, and there's a MASH adult safeguarding, they're showing us the 2 with the greatest outstanding. So actually there is a better picture than is shown there. But we've still got much better improved oversight with the chief officer, staff officers really helping us push those forward. And we've prioritised ones that either align with stuff to do with our HMIC so that we're not duplicating work as well. So, yeah.
Good. There was one we had recently on bail and RUI, which
That's just newly issued, isn't it?
Yeah.
That one?
So might not feature in your numbers here, but that was one that was a little bit concerned, particularly in the context of the conversation we were having around knife crime offences. But we're going to pick that audit up to pick up with the work that we're doing behind the scenes to go back to liaison. So
I've already alerted Ben to the fact that it's coming to next liaison because he is chair of REAL.
Yeah.
Will be best placed to just sort of pick that up for you, Jason.
Okay. Good stuff. And HMIC?
Yeah. I'm just trying to work out how I move my slide on.
There we go.
So on the left, that's our peel AFIs from last peel. That looks static at the moment, but we've been told by HMIC they will close those and any new AFIs will be superseded. So those essentially stay on there until our appeal cycle is finished. And then on the right hand side, that's everything else, with the arrows are trying to show where we get new national thematic inspections come in, but actually the trajectory for everything is with the exception of AFIs is reducing, so we've got really good grip on those.
Good. And I think it's in June or July we're expecting. July. That was me getting too excited that we're a month early, but July we will get the next one, and then it will all start all over again.
It will, if not before.
Indeed. We've got the I still got in my inbox the response to the integrity inspection. But I think that's the last one then that we're up to date with.
We've written the response for you. I think we were just debating getting it over to Ben for him to have a quick look.
Yeah, that's fine.
There's another one that's come as well. Will be hitting you.
The only thing
it's to do with online charge.
Oh yes, it was a national,
that was an HMIC national one, wasn't it?
which to be fair, TVP got some very good mentions in.
Yeah. The only thing that struck me on your slide was the custody
Yes.
inspection had 35. Was that 35 AFIs?
So we had a cause for concern and some AFIs that accompanied that.
Okay, so in terms of, is there anything you want to brief Matthew on in relation to that?
So we've had our cause of concern closed. There are still some AFIs, but that's actually one of the ones that I've got the most confidence of in terms of being gripped. We've done so much.
Even though you read the report, we did really, and the inspection rating said we did really well.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those areas they're looking at, and the standards really up here, what the expectations are.
Yeah.
Good. Anybody got anything else on inspections?
Just worth, we'll probably get our refreshed view of where we sit in the tiers around the same time that we get the appeal reports. They're running the first version of their tiering in June. They're going to report back in July. That's the first one that every force is going to be looked at.
How often do they plan to re-tier you?
3 times a year.
3 times a year?
Yeah.
That was me thinking it was an annual thing.
No, me too.
And it's not clear what criteria they use. Matty's trying to work it well afterwards. They're not very clear yet, are they?
No,
It's something to-
in the test pilot that came to a conclusion at the end of March, and we got our result that we were in tier 1. There was a section in the letter that was sent to Jason, I think yourself, that said reason for grading, and under that it just said this is the definition of a tier 1 grading. It didn't say why they were there. So I'm trying to feed that back. A number of other performance leads are trying to feed that back. That what we really want here is transparency and understanding of where we are and why we're there, and then we can work on it.
And I think that was the problem with the old system. I mean, in principle, I'm quite supportive of it. I think it's quite helpful because you were either in engage or you weren't, and you weren't quite sure. There were some forces who probably felt they were on the edge of engagement, nobody would ever tell them. So having that does make some sense. But what isn't clear is, so you're in tier 1 at the moment, nice and safe, all good. You could get a 4 appeal in July, and presumably skip, go down to 3, doesn't it? 4.
Yeah.
So, but if you have a really bad appeal, presumably you jump straight down to 4 because why wouldn't you be in 4? If you had all inadequate, then presumably you would be in the 4th tier.
Yes, and I think this is one of the key questions that we've been asking of HYC, and I think it's fair to say that they themselves are still trying to work this through. What takes primacy in those tiering decisions? Is it the national performance framework, which we know isn't fully fleshed out yet? Is it the appeal cycle, which runs totally counter in terms of rhythm to a 3 times a year review?
Yeah.
Is it something else? So we're trying to work that through, and I think HMIC are as well, which is why we're not getting that clarity yet.
What would be really helpful is if you could share with me, Matty, any feedback you send in to HMIC on that. Just because as part of the APACE network, we're getting involved in some of the national, in the same way Jason is, we're getting involved, and so it would be good to make sure there's a couple of voices giving that feedback back in, and I'm very happy to do that if you share with me what your thinking is.
Yeah, that's great. So I've taken on the role of PMCC, HMIC liaison. I can't. But in essence, in the performance management kind of leadership national kind of groups.
Yeah.
I'm supporting DCC Scott Bissett from North
Brilliant.
Yorkshire, who's got the HYC link
Mhm.
around all of this stuff. So I'm keeping us kind of sighted on that as I possibly can.
Oh,
I'll feed
there's-
that back
The-
to you.
yeah. And there's no reflection on whether your voice alone will make the difference. I just think
I certainly don't think it will, Julie. I think I'd
But-
appreciate
but-
as many as we can.
yeah, but as many voices as we can sharing that feedback, I think it's really useful.
I mean, that letter, it's probably not a problem if you're in tier one, not giving an explanation of why.
You're not bothered, are
But
you?
if you're
Plus, if you're
two,
in tier
three or
four,
four,
you'd
you
like
need
to know
to there's literally
Exactly.
what data they're using and then what you need to do
And
to get out.
maybe they do.
And the fact there,
That's the question.
is now that you could read into that because I think it arrived the same week that we had the hot debrief. With HMRC,
It did.
didn't it?
You're
You could
absolutely right.
infer into that. Well, we don't know what the grading is, but you're in tier one, so it's all going to be okay when it lands. But we know there is going to be no link between.
No,
the
there
two.
won't be.
It would be lovely if there was. But
I know for a fact that Lee, for example, has not been involved at all in tiering and stuff.
No.
And so.
That would be
hopefully
too soon.
There's some, maybe, but yes, it ought to be realistic.
okay, good stuff. Thank you very much indeed. Have you got anything else? Any other business? No. Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.